So Alex, we watched Halloween 3.
We sure did. The end. Halloween ends. That was wow. Yeah.
Wait, you saw Halloween Ends?
Yeah.
No,
Halloween ends.
I was talking about Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. I thought that's what we were going to talk about. That's what I watched.
Why would we do that?
Because I don't know, it's like Halloween, it takes place on Halloween.
Okay, it's Halloween, but I paid money to go see Halloween ends in theaters.
Why would you pay money? It's just streaming on Peacock already.
Yeah, that's what I did. I streamed it too on Peacock.
Nick, when the hell did you get here?
It's my house. I invited you guys over to do this.
So let's just talk about both of them, but we should probably start with Season of the Witch because it's the older movie, and it's also, in my opinion, the weirder movie. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It is weird. It's a victim and also a benefactor of what it is to how popular it is now in current media. And I was acting when I said I wasn't excited. Why the hell would we talk about season 3 of The Witch? I was excited to talk about Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. It is arguably the best number 3 horror movie in my opinion. Next to The Exorcist 3, which you two need to watch, and then we can do this again for that.
Okay.
Because that is a great film. But yeah, Season of the Witch is like a lightning in a bottle, but also like a disaster. Like a disaster of what happened to it. Because, if it was in the place of Halloween 2, it'd be cult, even more of a cult classic than it is now. But because you have the precedent of Halloween 1 and 2, same story, same night, right after each other, then you jump into an anthology series. It's like, people didn't like that.
Yeah, we're going to jump into all of it. First, I just want to ask Nick, I know you're a huge Michael Myers fan, so what's your initial opinion when it comes to Halloween 3 as a movie, with it not having Michael Myers at all? I've always been curious.
Well, I mean, most people, especially nowadays, are, like major like MCU or like Star Wars fans. Like they know all the timelines, all the what's canon, what's not, all the relationships. That's what the Halloween series is for me. I'm just obsessed with the entire series from beginning to end. And I mean, Halloween 3 is honestly probably one of my top 5 just favorite movies in general. I don't know. I think growing up, I always had the stigma of like, oh yeah, that's the one without Michael Myers. It sucks. And I'm like, oh yeah, whatever. But I hadn't really gotten into the movies yet. And then after I watched it, I realized just how much I love like kind of shitty, not shitty, but corny 80s,
B-movie
type
stuff.
80s type horror movies that don't really make a lot of sense but are really entertaining. And once I watched this movie, I just absolutely fell in love with it. So besides the first one, this might be my favorite one. It's even though it has nothing to do with Michael Myers.
Yeah, I had a similar experience growing up, obviously loving the original Halloween, seeing it as a young kid, and then hearing about this movie as I was growing up and it not having anything to do with it, made me curious. So once I got into the internet and found the story out about it, that fascinated me before I ever saw the movie. So it also, and we'll talk about all the Halloween movies in our Patreon exclusive, but just to quickly mention Halloween 2, it also made me like Halloween 2 more because it made me think like, oh, well, they were actually they were killing Michael Myers in that movie, even though that's ultimately not what happened. But it makes me like Halloween 2, that much more. But Halloween Season of the Witch, yeah, we're going to jump into it.
It's like the opening comes up with like the TV credits and like a little like teaser for the end because, kids have to watch the TV with the masks on and shows the masks. The score is like very like 80s synth type deal. It's like very ominous. And apparently it takes place in Northern California, but it looks like Haddonfield, Illinois. It does not look like any part of California I've ever seen.
It also leads to the first death of the movie of one of the henchman guys getting crushed by the 2 cars. Obviously, when you think about slashers like Michael Myers or Halloween, you think about the kills. I think it's funny that Michael Myers isn't in this movie, but this might have the most out there, weirdest kills of any of the Halloween movies, with the way everyone dies as we'll go through.
And a nice little teaser again. He just looks at the car coming right at him. Doesn't make an expression at all.
Yeah, I love the opening, and to piggyback off what you said, just the music is incredible. I love the 80s synth sound. He ends up, getting away and getting to the gas station, but just the opening, I don't know, it just puts me in the mood to watch this movie. It's
smoky, creepy vibe. And did you notice when you get to the gas station, the attendant is watching TV, and before the commercial comes on, it's like a Stonehenge documentary.
Oh,
it's like,
wow.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
like,
it's-
oh, look at that little tease for that.
So the gas station attendant takes him to the hospital, which is where we meet Dr. Chalice, right?
Dr. Dan Chalice, yep.
Yeah, and I love the gas station attendant talking in that scene.
Thanks a lot for bringing him. Appreciate
Well, thank you, Doc. I was always taught that when somebody needs help, you help them.
I mean, unless there's going to be trouble.
And then there's a shot of him like leaving and like
he just
turning
runs
back.
down the hallway
Yeah,
like,
like, can I go?
Yeah, I don't want to get blamed for this.
When the guy's in the hospital, the Silver Shamrock commercial plays on the TV in one of the hospital rooms. We hear that commercial and that theme throughout the entire movie, and it's, I would say, one of even the most iconic parts of the movie. You know, even today, people always reference that.
Yeah, and then the guy finds him, the guy in the suit, right? And like the most weird death I've ever seen, ever.
Another
God.
weird one.
Like,
Yeah.
because
Brutal.
the guy, like, he lines up, like, he's gonna punch him, and then he opens his fist, and then does a grabs your, got your nose, and just like pulls out the bone, like not all the way out, just enough to like extend it. It's like,
After the guy gets killed, Dr. Chalice sees the guy that killed him. And the guy just goes out into his car
yeah,
and it
like-
explodes.
yeah, so he's not, yeah, you see a great shot of him pouring like the gas on him,
Yeah.
and then lighting the match, and
And then Dr. Chalice, I think after this goes home, and is it his wife and kids he goes home to?
Yes.
ex-wife and kids.
Oh, it's his ex-wife. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's the first appearance of the masks. The kids wearing the masks when he gets them like kind of crappy masks. Like, oh, we already have these Silver Shamrock ones, and the commercial comes on again.
8 4 days to Halloween.
Turn that down.
And I like the masks. They did a good job of making they're like simple, you know, pumpkin, witch, skeleton, but they're also like kind of well done and unique to this movie.
And I think the mom might be my favorite character because all she does is bitch at him, but it's like reasonable. It's not like nagging. It's like she's making a lot of good points.
Linda, I can't get out of it. I'm really sorry. Linda, take it easy.
She's like, I gotta go. Like when he goes, we'll get to this later, but when he leaves with the daughter, he grabs a 6-pack off the payphone and runs off. I gotta go. But then we're introduced to the daughter of the man that was killed. What was her name?
Ellie Grimbridge.
And I just want to say, so this is going to be a big topic of the movie, but obviously, and we're obviously spoiling both movies here, but with Ellie and ultimately what's revealed at the end of her being one of these robots, originally I always thought that Ellie was a real person, then was killed, and then when she's like taken into that room, they make a robot of her. But I don't know, rewatching this movie today for this video, for some reason I started to get like thoughts of forming a theory that she's actually a robot the whole time. Because she shows up at the bar and she's like, "Oh, hey, are you Dr. Chalice? One of the nurses told me I could find you here." What? It's just,
Yeah.
you could just say it's lazy writing. Maybe I'm giving the movie more credit than it deserves, but I was like, that's kind of weird. I'm starting to form a theory she is a robot but isn't aware of it at first until the events of the movie play out.
One, she's like 19, interested in this 50-year-old man. Not to knock Tom Atkins, but 50-year-old and 19-year-old. And until after they hook up, I think he's like, "How old are you?"
Yeah.
I've been the same way as you. As I've watched it more and more, I've kind of come to think that, yeah, I think she was a robot the whole time. I think Cochran sent her there.
But if she is fully aware that she is a robot the whole time, at the very least, the writing is inconsistent. But we'll get to all that. She meets him at the bar, and I think this is also when they play on the TV at the bar the commercial of the original Halloween.
The Immortal Classic, followed by the big giveaway at 9.
Great touch. That's another little great touch in the movie. And then I also love it. It shows the commercial, and then it goes to the Silver Shamrock song again. And Dr. Chalice is like, "Turn that off." And the bartender's like, "Don't you have any Halloween spirit?" He's like, "No."
No.
No, I'm done.
Come on. What's the matter? Don't you have any Halloween spirit? No.
And that's one of the few times I laughed out loud during the movie. That's great.
What a great like establishment too, just in a bar by himself, just like.
And then when he gets to the hotel, we also meet obviously the hotel manager, but then we also meet the family.
Hey, buddy Cup for San Diego. This is my wife, Betty.
Pleased to meet you.
And then we also meet
Marge.
Marge, yeah.
Marge Gutman.
The greatest kill in the
Yeah.
entire
Oh, God.
film.
So then once they get into the hotel room, they have a drink. This is where they hook up.
Where do you want to sleep, Dr. Chalice?
That's a dumb question, Miss Grimbridge.
And they just immediately start making out. And I'm like, oh my God.
I always loved his honesty. Like, "Oh, where do you think I want to sleep?" Obviously with you, so.
We talk about my actual favorite character, the homeless guy.
Oh, yeah. I ain't got no diseases or nothing.
Can I have a drink?
Yeah.
It's like, ugh.
I'm gonna get me about a case and a half of Molotov cocktails.
Burn that son of a bitch right now.
And then don't they kill him right after this?
Yeah,
and
and
just
then
rip his head right
Then
off?
two suits come out and they do this really weird shot where they grab him by the neck and then they put him to his knees. And then they cut to like a faraway shot with like two guys standing, then him on his knees in the middle. It's like, did you do that on purpose? And then he just grabs his head and pulls it off. And the actor, whoever it was, perfectly like showed no emotion at all. Like the same thing with the guy looking at the car running him over. Like you can tell his body's shaking, he's moving, but his face is not moving at all. Like
Dick Warlock, who played Michael Myers in Halloween 2.
really?
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Wow.
That's who played him.
Marge has a defective mask, and then she's just in a room by herself, just tinkering with it. And then that great shot of her just laying there, at the
Yeah.
mouth. I'm like, that still grosses me out. And then the bugs start crawling out of her. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It's like a real bug too.
Yeah,
Like-
It's like that big too. It's like this huge bug just crawls out of her mouth. Like, oh my god.
And then that's when they are having sex later on in the night during. And this is again made me start to think. I'm like, okay, now this woman's dying, and he is like,
What's that?
Who cares?
he's distracted because he's having sex with her. And it's like it was another little thing. Like, oh, like all these little pieces started like kind of coming together for me in this theory. But then after she dies, people from Silver Shamrock come and they do go outside their hotel room to be like, hey, what's going on here? And that's when we meet.
Connell Cochran.
Mr. Cochran, good to see you, sir.
Ah, good evening, Mr. Rafferty.
You obviously get a creepy vibe when he's just kind of like, brushing it off. No big deal.
Yeah, no hospital.
And I think they even huddle up at first. He's like, what happened? And the guy goes like, oh, malfunction. And he's like, oh,
Yeah, it says
okay.
misfire.
Yeah,
Yeah,
misfire.
yeah.
Misfire.
And then the characters hear him clearly, even though they're whispering,
Yeah.
because then he's like, a misfire, like he questions it. So after this happens, I think the next morning they do then go to the factory with this family as well.
I like when they're introducing everybody. Then Cochran goes to Tom Atkins and the woman.
And as for my other friends, Mr. and Mrs.
Smith.
Smith, of course.
It's like, really? That's all you got?
Yeah.
Oh, he's like, oh yes, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, of course.
That's when they do the demonstration, I believe, right, with the family.
That was pretty messed up. Killing a kid on screen like that in this. I think it happens like at the smaller horror movies all the time, but in terms of like, this is probably a huge release. I mean, coming off of Halloween 2 and Halloween, the original, it's like people were super into it, and yeah, pretty ballsy.
I mean, it's like one of those rules about horror movies, right? Like the same reason like virgins aren't supposed to be able to die or whatever. Like you don't kill kids because they're innocent. Like that's why they kill horny teenagers doing drugs and stuff. So it's always weird and interesting when you see a child, who's innocent get killed. Even though every time in this movie and in Halloween Ends, which we're going to talk about, the kid that dies is portrayed as like an extreme asshole, beforehand.
Yeah.
But still, they're a child. And it's brutal because you can still see his like eyeball, like his face when he's dead on the ground with the snake coming out of his mouth. It is brutal.
Yeah, but nothing is as unfair and brutal as the death of fake Mike Myers in Halloween 2.
Ben Tramer.
Just some guy walking down the street. No due process. The guy just runs him over.
That's always the best.
Yeah. Like, he pulls the cop out of the car. He's like, oh, I didn't see him. And what is he just driving like this and just hits the guy? He's walking in the middle of the street.
So he didn't kill him because he was dressed as Michael
No,
Myers.
he's like, no, I'm sorry, I didn't see him.
This is like a Midwestern town where it's probably 25 miles per hour
yeah.
down the side streets. Why are you going 60?
That's great. Then he's tied up, and this is where, for me, the film really kind of falls off, because then we get about 15 minutes of Dr. Chalice just escaping and then walking around the facility like stealthily for like a really, really long time. And I remember watching it today thinking like, oh, this must only be like 15 minutes left or something. And no, there was like a full half hour left. I'm like, what happens? And it's because 15 minutes of it is him just walking around. And then he finds Ellie, and then they walk around slowly. I'm like, oh my God, get to it.
But yeah, Cochran's monologue about, Halloween and the origins 3,000 years ago. It's like, whoever that actor was, he just nailed it.
You don't really know much about Halloween.
And the actor Dan O'Hurley, he was actually, I think he's Irish in real life. So like he actually like had all the knowledge of Festival of Samhain, like the origins of Halloween.
The Festival of Samhain. The last great one took place 3,000 years ago when the hills ran red.
I mean, yeah, it doesn't really make any sense. Like, oh yeah, the planets are aligned, and it's just happens to be 3,000 years. So yeah, okay, this is why it's happening. And then Stonehenge, never really explained. But I mean, I mean, he's such a good actor, though. He still delivers that monologue. It's so great, even though it, again, doesn't really make a ton of sense.
Dr. Chalice is able to save Ellie, and at this point, she has to be a robot. Even if she wasn't the whole time, she now at this point has to be a robot, which is why the writing is inconsistent, because then she helps him destroy and kill everybody.
Cochrane's death, his acceptance, just, you know. Like, doesn't even care. It's like, maybe because he knows it's already in motion.
Yeah, it looks like he turns to stone, but then he just fades out. It's like, okay.
Turning to stone would have been cooler.
Yeah, yeah, just like he's a statue or something like that, but no, just fades out like, all right, well.
And then they're driving, and this is where Ellie then reveals she's this android and starts to try to kill Dr. Chalice, so he crashes the car. And that whole sequence also went on like a really long time. Like, you keep thinking she's dead, and then she just, like, her headless body pops up, her arm pops up and chokes, so I'm like, oh my god.
That's when you start to realize, like, oh yeah, she hasn't said anything, and like, since he rescued her, like, why isn't she talking at all? And then she's just like,
yeah. And so what do you think, Nick, is like, what do you think the motivation was of the writing that in there? Did they just want to throw in a cheap twist and they didn't care that it didn't make sense? Or was there some type of plan, you think, but then they just ultimately, it didn't come together? Because there's too many inconsistencies for it to make sense, but I don't want to think like, oh, they just threw it in as a cheap twist without thinking about it at all. You know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, this movie had, Nigel Neal wrote it first, then John Carpenter did a rewrite, and then Tommy Lee Wallace, the director, did another rewrite. So I feel like maybe it could have just been like,
Lost in the...
yeah, like maybe that could have gone somewhere initially, but it just got changed, and now it doesn't really make sense. It's kind of out of place. But I mean, again, a lot of the stuff in the movie doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I think a lot of that just has to do with the inconsistent writing and rewrites and stuff like that. But yeah, it like you said, it doesn't make sense that if she's a robot, well, we know she's a robot when he rescues her, and then she just helps him. She doesn't like try to stop him or kill him right there when he like dumps all the buttons out and stuff like that. So I think it's just inconsistent because of so many rewrites on this movie.
I just feel like it's some guy with a cigarette. We need a twist.
Studio executive.
Yeah. We need a twist. What if she's a robot? But that doesn't make. He had sex. She's a robot. Put it in.
So to wrap up the movie, after that scene, then is when he arrives again. Same gas station attendant arrives at his gas station, and he's trying to stop it from playing on the TV, and it's on First Channel. Now, I was kind of confused. Maybe you can clear this up, what you guys think of it. He calls and he's begging him to take it off. The kids then come in the gas station, which is just cherry on top. This guy's trying to stop it, then he has to see the kids right in front of him. It's playing on the First Channel. It says, please stand by. Gets taken off. It gets taken off the second channel. And the third one, he's like, no, it's still in the third one. Do you think they're going to listen to this guy at all? Like, I was confused they would even try to turn it off of any of the channels.
It's Halloween night. People might just be pulling a prank, and it's like, yeah, again, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but okay.
Yeah, any studio executive was like, we're not turning this off. You know how much money this commercial's making us?
Yeah, exactly, and that's another like big criticism of the movie, which I understand, is the whole thing. It doesn't take into account time zone. So like Eastern time zone is first. Like, okay, what if they stop it there, but then, the Western time zone and the Central time zone, like, okay, it's still going to happen with them. So it's like...
Which reminds me of something you brought up before we started recording. It's showing the cities of all the kids trick-or-treating, because it does show cities all around the country, starting with Dayton, Ohio is the first one. So random. Why Dayton, Ohio?
Yeah, so it's like, okay, well, if, like, let's say people in like Dayton, Ohio, like get killed, like, okay, the news isn't going to travel across the country.
Yeah.
Okay, take these masks off.
Well, it's kind of an open ending.
Third channel, it's still running. Stop it, please. Turn it off. Turn it off. Stop it! Stop it!
And then it goes to credits. So it's kind of an open ending, which I really liked. I think a movie like this, it's a little bit, I can tell audiences at the time could have definitely been soured by it and by the ending, but I think that makes the movie much better having it end like that.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, an ending like that, it's like, we don't need to know what happens. I don't care. It's like, did it work? Did it not? I think it did.
Yeah, I think they definitely all died.
It definitely did, yeah. I think definitely. And the fact, in this universe that all these kids are dead, like, I don't know, it's like something that you can think about. You know what I mean? A movie that leaves you like thinking, like, oh, what's going on afterwards? You know what I mean? That's kind of neat. Talking about the legacy of the film, it's like, I want to ask you guys this: do you think that this would be kind of like a double question here? Do you think this film would be a cult classic, even more than it is now, if it was just called Season of the Witch and wasn't even related to Halloween? Because I think its popularity is purely because of Halloween 3. Sure, it received that hate, but over time, people came around stopped thinking about the guy in the white mask and started looking at this from a movie.
Yeah, I see it two ways. I think, because people would always say, like, oh, well, if it was just called Season of the Witch, it would have done a lot better. Well, maybe, but I don't think that's true, because if it's just called Season of the Witch, it might have just been, lost, but it says Halloween, so that's what got people to go see it in the first place, even though it didn't do very well.
Yeah, not a lot of people still did.
Yeah, people still went to go see it. A lot more people went to go see it if it says Halloween as opposed to just Season of the Witch. People still just write it off. They're like, oh, it was just so bad, Michael Myers, it doesn't make sense, no Michael Myers in it, whatever. But I think if people really took the time to appreciate it and just look at it as a standalone movie, not part of, everything else, the 4 other timelines that there are, I think people would appreciate it a lot more.
Yeah, I think a little bit of what you're saying, but I also think, first of all, we have to accept that it would be a reality where this movie would even still get made, right? Like without Halloween. I mean, I know it was the 80s, things were different, things got made a little bit easier.
There's plenty of direct-to-video horror movies from that time.
Sure, but the only reason I did hear and watch of it is because, it's in Halloween. So I want to flip it a little bit. Thinking about it from the Halloween perspective, do you think as a franchise and a property, Halloween suffers because this movie is in it?
No.
Because I think that no other franchise out there, horror franchise at least, has something like this where it's like it's not like it's a Conjuring story, right? Like it's literally Halloween 3 and then the next one is Halloween 4. So, I mean, what you said no. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, I think, their original idea was to go with an anthology series, and so like every 2 years, you could come up with a different story on Halloween, and then any of those movies could branch off in their own sequels and whatnot. But I think when you already make Halloween 2 with Michael Myers, you can't just do Halloween 3, because then, I'm sorry, but people are just going to expect, okay, it's going to be the continuation of the same story.
Here's a segue. Halloween Resurrections and Halloween Ends had Michael Myers in it, and look how that turned out. So
there you go.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah.
And that was going to be my last hypothetical here. John Carpenter's original plan was Michael Myers is dead, let's make a new Halloween film every year. Let's say this film succeeded and that did happen, and Michael Myers would have still come back eventually in some type of reboot or whatever. But if in the original, from Halloween to Halloween Resurrection, that original timeline before the Rob Zombie reboot, do you think it was worth it to go back to Michael Myers? I mean, we'll talk about this in the Patreon exclusive when we talk about every movie, but realistically, how many more good Michael Myers movies did we even end up getting? You know what I mean? So would you have almost rathered it been successful and then we got 4 or 5 sequels of random John Carpenter Halloween stories?
John Carpenter is probably my favorite director, so I love his style. I love his, how he makes movies. So I think I would have liked it if they would have actually gone with an anthology series, but obviously with the lack of success of this, they're kind of like, all right, Michael Myers is going to make us so much money.
But here's an interesting thought. Yeah. If Halloween 3 was successful, would The Thing be Halloween 4 or 5, The Thing? Would The Fog would be Halloween 6? What if he still made those movies, but it just had Halloween in front of it? Yeah.
Could have worked if they didn't go with Halloween 2 being basically basically this part 2 of the first movie.
Think about it. All of Carpenter's movies could, if they kept the anthology thing, because The Thing is like a single, isolated story. Yeah. You know what I mean? The Fog, pretty isolated story. They could all be Halloween stories.
Ghosts of Mars.
And
So we just got done talking about a great movie. So now it's time to talk about possibly the worst film I've ever seen.
Come on.
Okay, not the worst film I've ever seen, but, I talked with you, I was already falling out of love with movie theaters. I was just, terrible experience, people, whatever, and then we went to see Nope in IMAX. Made me fall in love again. Went and saw Barbarian in theaters. Made me fall in love even more. Just, fall in love with, watch something from something completely unknown, blah, blah, blah. We'll get into that if you ever see it. And I'm like, okay, let's go see Halloween Ends. And then the first thing I said when I walked out of the theater with you was like, well, I just fell out of love with my theater experience. Not to the fault of the theater. Everyone in there was fine. And if anything, I was a ridiculous one. But I just didn't enjoy it at all. Should we go spoiler free for the first 5 minutes and then jump into it? Or
no, I think like we said at the beginning, this movie's on Peacock. Anyone who wants to watch it can watch it. So I don't think there's any reason to act as if it's like an exclusive in theater movie. I mean, so yes, we will be spoiling it. But I did not like it. However, I think my expectations weren't very high, so I wasn't oh man, like I'm so pissed, you know.
Well, I watched the movie from the comfort of my own home, right on this couch,
Good
in
choice.
this exact seat, and I still thought the movie was kind of, was kind of mid. So, kind of. Obviously, it looked great. You know, some of the shots especially remind me of the original Halloween. You know, with like the fall type of overcast and then the neighborhood streets. It seemed like a small town vibe. The acting I thought was very good, especially from the newcomer who played Corey Cunningham. I can't remember what his
I
name
thought it
is.
sucked, but go on.
So anyways, I thought he was really good. I would love to come back and talk about this Halloween trilogy as a whole because I think, to me, it's completely out of order.
Well, let's start there very briefly. Let's just a very high-level description of how you feel about each movie in the trilogy. I thought the first one was fine. They earned like bringing back Jamie Lee Curtis and redoing it. Like I felt they did it good and different enough that it made sense. But I just feel like like most everything else, I feel like they wish they just would have left it there because the second movie was probably close to my least favorite of the entire series, and then this one I don't think was as bad as the last one, but it was just like a mess and did not at all feel like a finale outside of the last 5 minutes.
I liked Halloween 2018 a lot. I think I like it more because after Halloween Kills and how much I was disappointed with that, so I think it's kind of bumped Halloween 2018 up for me. And then this one I thought was just kind of average. But again, I think it's out of order. I think for this one, this should have been the first one in the trilogy, where, you have Corey not like basically being like, best friends with Michael Myers and like, oh, I need to borrow this mask and just rips it off him and just goes. But like, if you have him, still have that traumatic experience and like being like, oh yeah, I'm going to go around killing people and like people think it's Michael Myers, but it's actually this Corey kid. And then she kills him, but then actually Michael comes back, and faces Laurie at the end of this movie. Then you lead into Halloween Kills, where Michael kind of gets his revenge and like does all the same stuff, kills people and stuff, and then you end it with the plot of 2018 minus like him getting out of the asylum and stuff. That's when you have the final confrontation at her house with all those traps. Him looking for her, him having that great moment where he throws her off the balcony, looks and she's not there. And then having him, again, you have it like Halloween 2, how this series was supposed to end. Especially how they built it up. Like, Jamie Lee Curtis is like, yeah, this is my last one. This, I love the fans. This means so much to me. And then it's like, okay, well, you fight with Michael for like 10 minutes in the kitchen, and then you grind him up.
You can just tell. You know my feeling. Where
Yep.
you're sitting in a movie and you're just like, oh. But actually, during the first scene, I thought the first scene was great.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
The first scene was great. Calling tribute back. Because what are they watching? They're watching 1982 The Thing. Because in the first Halloween, they're watching The Thing from Another World. So it's like, nice. I wanted them to do that in Halloween 2018. And they did it in this one. I'm like, nice. But what a ballsy opening with him kicking the door open. The kid just dies.
What was that?
And I think the opening might have been my favorite part of the entire movie. It's a funny comparison, but it almost reminded me of the opening of The Batman from earlier this year, where it shows all the criminals, like, you don't see Batman, but they're all just afraid of, like, is Batman in the shadows. And this was kind of the same opening I felt they were trying to go for of, like, this incident kind of happened because, what's his name, Corey? I already forgot. Corey is like, everyone in the town is afraid of Michael Myers. So like this whole incident of the kid being an asshole playing this prank gets him killed because Corey then gets legitimately afraid. And then they kind of show in the whole town everyone killing themselves or these things happening, and it's all because of the fear left by Michael Myers. I really liked that idea. And I would have liked to see that idea play out in its own movie like this did, and almost just like not include Michael Myers, which I mean this film didn't for a long time, but not for like the finale of the trilogy. My biggest frustration with this movie is that I hated Halloween Kills, but the ending of it, you kill Laurie Strode's daughter, the person who she should love more than anyone else in the world. Then you open up this movie and it's 4 years later and it's just like a footnote. And they're just like, he killed my daughter. Anyway,
Anyway, I'm writing a book for money.
And I know that it's 4 years later and you get over things and there's grief, but it's like, I didn't really like anything about that second movie, but I was like, oh, at least we'll get to see Laurie more pissed off. I thought it was going to be I'm hunting down Michael, getting revenge for my daughter, and that barely even played a role. That was my biggest frustration.
It's like, Michael ruined her. I mean, I was surprised to see what they did with Laurie in Halloween 2018, I'm like, oh my God, she's like messed up, like really like training for 40 years. It's like that, that's big. And then her daughter dies. It's like, oh well, you got to move on. It's like,
Yeah, exactly.
It's like
Also, just when he gets to the house and he's looking for Laurie and Laurie's looking for him and stuff like that. That was such a great scene. Again, other than just, oh, we're gonna fight in the kitchen for about 5 minutes, and then I'm gonna like cut his throat, cut his wrist, and then tying him to the hood of the car, and then everyone's like, we're just like carrying him.
I started busting out laughing.
Yeah, it's like, okay, let's just carry him to this meat grinder. It's like,
I want to say this, small disagreement. I like the meat grinder only because I think in Halloween 1, you shoot him off the balcony, he disappears. Like, okay, you can't kill him normally. Halloween 2, they do the hospital on fire, which at the time was actually supposed to kill him. And then he eventually comes back in Halloween 4. They have some excuse of like, oh, he's fine, whatever. But once like Halloween 4 started, all of the killings of Michael Myers started just being like really weak to the point where you don't even believe he's dead. Like in Halloween 4, they shoot him a bunch of times into the grave or whatever. And then in Halloween 6, Paul Rudd just beats him up with a pipe. Like the death started getting like to the point where like he's not dead. And then even Halloween 2018, I like them burning in the house, but then it's like, did anyone think he's going to die? Like I was like immediately like, okay, yeah, he's going to be fine. So literally slitting his throat and wrist and putting him in a meat grinder, at least like his physical body, has been destroyed. Yeah. You don't see that a lot with like slashers. They'll just like, shoot him or something, and they're like, he's dead. It's like, he's not dead, clearly.
Yeah, but they established the idea, like, oh, the evil, it infects, it infected Corey. Yeah. So, like, destroying Michael Myers' body did nothing, because the evil goes to someone else. You know what I mean?
Well, she does say at the end of the movie, evil never dies, it just changes shape.
Yeah.
So,
that I liked. Okay, I'll give it that, because they call Michael Myers to shape since the first movie. Evil changes shape, Mike. Okay, I'll give you that one. That's all you get. That's all you get.
And there were good little moments, which we'll get to, throughout the movie that were just like sprinkled in, and it just like wasn't enough. You talked about the acting from most of the main characters being good. I'm leaning more towards Alex. I didn't like Corey's character, but I don't think the actor was given very good stuff. So like I'm not gonna fully blame him. But the bullies, man, irredeemable. Just terrible acting from all of them.
You're that psycho babysitter.
He killed that kid, didn't he? Yep.
Why in every movie are like high school bullies have no morals whatsoever? Like they just kill people and they'll just be like, whatever, let's go. It's like they just
he fell. I shoved him off a bridge, but he fell.
Yeah.
It's like have some like depth or something. Like the best villains have some humanity in them.
So we have the relationship after that with Corey meeting Laurie Strode's granddaughter and their whole relationship, which I didn't buy the entire movie. I was like, why would she like him? She explains it about the trauma and everything, but
like I didn't recognize the character from the first two films, like at all. Yeah. Like nothing. Like as soon as this guy comes in, it's like completely different character. It didn't.
And he's like not appealing or charismatic at all.
No.
Yeah, he's like this kid with like shaggy hair. He's all bruised and stuff. She's like, oh, why don't you take me to ride your motorcycle sometime? And it's like, what is this coming from?
Then they go to the bar, right? And they have the dance scene. Like, oh, they're having fun. And he goes to the bar, and the mom's there of the kid he killed. It's like, there was some good tension. Sometimes there was some good tension, but the entire time during these scenes, I'm like, where's Michael Myers?
Yeah, I think it was at that point where I leaned over to you and I'm like, do you think Michael Myers is going to be in this movie? It had been like 40 minutes at this point.
It's one thing for Season of the Witch, it doesn't advertise Michael Myers, and you could be asking where he is, but when Michael Myers' face is plastered on all the advertisements and it's 45 minutes in, you're like, what's going on?
Yeah, and even having more patience with it, let's say he only shows up in the last half hour, but then he's awesome, like, I'm still even okay with that, like, if it's going to tell a whole story before, but after seeing the movie, and him not really being a major part until the very end, because it's just thrown in, it just made me question, like, did they even want him in this movie? Like, it was kind of weird to me.
Corey being, like, in a typical movie, like, him being, like, the main guy, then Michael being, like, the, like, oh, like, fuck you, like, you're my assistant, like, do whatever I say. Like the one thing, he's like wrestling with him and just like pulls the mask off of him. I'm like, I know Michael's old, but like, why is this kid just like, is like, no, I'm calling the shots here, and then just shows up for the last.
Oh yeah, and just when he first discovers him in the sewer and he just like grabs him by the throat and just like.
That's another issue.
He just mind melds with them, like everything I know now. It's like now you're, like.
I don't know. I actually like that part because, first of all, I hate Michael being in a sewer. He's not Pennywise, but regardless, I like that moment just because it was like, I took it more as like, obviously this kid's been through a lot. Michael is pure evil, and it was more like the whole movie I saw it as like he's giving this kid his evil. Like, this is what Michael does. He wants the evil to spread. He knows he's getting old physically. He's living in a sewer. So it's like, he's like giving this kid the green light to like go be me. Even when the kid comes in and assaults him and takes the mask, I took that as like Michael almost let that happen. Like he fought him back, but really he's like, okay, yeah, like go do it. And then Michael doesn't show up until the kid kills himself. Like you see Michael's point of view of him like creeping on what's going on, but he doesn't actually intervene until the kid is dead, which was also stupid because I'm thinking the whole time like, okay, maybe they're trying to set this up for this kid to be in other movies. If that's the case, they're doing it terribly, but maybe they're trying that, and then he just kills himself.
If I can't have her.
And Laurie, you know, like the Eddie Guerrero spot. It's like how many fucking films have done that?
Eddie Guerrero spot.
Where you know, Laurie picks up the knife and is holding it like this,
and she hears the door turning for like 10 seconds, and like, oh, I'm just still holding it.
Yeah, that was really bad. But I think the last thing I really have to say, we've been shitting on it a lot. I did like the kills. I think a lot of the kills were good. The DJ kill I thought was very creative. The main bully, he just blowtorches his face, was pretty good. I thought the kills were pretty good, so I will give it that. And then even like in Halloween Kills and stuff too, I think the kills are good. He directs them well. I don't know who actually comes up with the ideas, if it's the writers or who, but yeah, good kills.
Yeah. For most of this, I kind of forgot it was made by that same guy who did all those cool kills in the first one. Because when the kills did happen in this one, I'm like, oh shit, you know, it's like, I'll give it that. Plus the dialogue was really funny, especially when they were outside the DJ's place. Whoever that DJ was hilarious. And there was a cameo from Darcy the Mail Girl from Shudder with Joe Bob Briggs. She was the clerk working there, so I did one of those Leo memes, you know.
Also, Nick Castle, the original guy who played Michael Myers, was in the bar scene. When the old guy comes up, he's like, "Oh, look at my costume."
That was him.
That was him.
Okay.
I thought when I first saw the homeless guy, I'm like, "Is that? No, it can't be."
I thought it was John Carpenter at first. I'm like, wait. I'm like, oh my god.
I say you go back. You go back in there and you get me that mask.
They clearly gave this trilogy to David Gordon Green, and big picture, I always think I like that, right? Like if you're gonna give it to somebody, like let them commit and actually do the whole thing. They didn't pull it from him after Halloween Kills, right? Like they let him do the whole thing. Unfortunately, I just think they picked the wrong person in this situation. A lot of the direction was good itself, but I mean, I don't know if he wrote the movie or how much of a hand he had in all the storytelling. But yeah, I just don't think this was, you know, the vision. It didn't feel like a cohesive vision. So I don't know, you know, what the story behind that is. But yeah, that's my biggest problem with it is as a trilogy, it doesn't work. It just makes me want to ignore these last two films and just watch the first one. But I do think Halloween Ends, if it wasn't Halloween Ends and it was just one of those random Halloween sequels, this story could work and be good. Someone wanting to be Michael Myers, finding him like just in the wilderness or whatever, and Michael, you know, pseudo training him to become Michael Myers could work, and they've even hinted on it with other characters in past movies, but they just can't do it right for whatever reason.
Didn't they comment on this in the first Halloween 2018? It's like, you know, there's like mass murderers and like mass shootings everywhere. Why do we care about this guy? You know what I mean?
And that's why I liked about 2018 Halloween is that they acknowledged that, and it's like, oh, well, it's actually just about Laurie being crazy and like being afraid of him. And then when Michael breaks out, he doesn't even give a shit about Laurie. Like, Laurie thinks the whole time, like, he's coming for me. And then in reality, he's like, he was only brought there by that crazy doctor.
Yeah. Again, then why does he try to kill her at the end of this movie?
Exactly.
As soon as Corey's dead, why doesn't he just, like, pick up his mask and then just turn and walk and go home?
So anyway, Nope is going to be on Blu-ray pretty soon.